All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Parenting Matters. Today, I'm really excited because I have a special guest who is a father and has a strong online presence talking about fatherhood, talking about being a man, talking about being a husband. And I just wanted to bring him on because I often feel that dads get drug along into parenting. And I'm sure that sometimes if you're a mom listening to this, then you can attest to your spouse gets, it seems like oftentimes moms are the ones that are more involved and interested in the parenting aspect of things. But we know that involved dads makes a huge difference in the lives of their children, in the lives of their spouse, in their own personal well-being and fulfillment and everything that goes along with that. And so talking with other dads about being an intentional father is something that I love getting to talk about. And I would love, Larry, if you could just introduce yourself and give us a little bit of contextual background about you and your podcast, The Dad's Edge, and we can just chat through some things.
Sure. Well, hey, thank you so much for having me on the show. Really, really appreciate it. Don't take this dad stuff lightly. Yeah. And you know, Dr. Phil, can I call you Dr. Phil? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Everybody, Dr. Phil, that name's a little bit spoken for, but I'll allow it today.
Okay. All right, cool. So, I got into the dad space because, one day I just woke up and I was like, wow, I know everything there is to know about being a father. I must share this with the world. So,
nice. That must have been a good day.
Yeah. And if you believe that one, I've got the winning lottery numbers for you too. So my story really just came out of struggle. I grew up with a very chaotic childhood as it pertains to a father, as it pertains to growing up. I mean, all kinds of, things that have happened, but I make a long story short, spent half my childhood without a father figure. And then the other half usually was some sort of toxic father figure that was present. My mom was married 3 times. She dated several men in between. Every guy was kind of the same guy, alcohol, abusive, just crazy. So I didn't know my biological father growing up. They were married for about 5 years before they had me. They had me and I think they got divorced within that first year. I actually had an opportunity to meet him, and it was by total accident when I was 12. And we hung out for about 6 months, and he was married at the time, had a 2-year-old and another one on the way. 6 months kind of rolled around. He was like, hey, I don't know if I can really do this. Kind of had the talk with me as it pertains to that, which really kind of wrecked me, to be honest.
Oh, I can't.
And it was pretty tough. And, it kind of spiraled me into emotional eating, and I repeated the 8th grade because I failed. I just gave up on school. And that second year of 8th grade, I really kind of turned my life around, got into a college prep, all boys high school, went on to college, finished college, went on to good career, and met my wife, who I'm married to now, in college. And we got married when I was about 28. And then we had our first son when I was 30.
Okay.
So 2 things happened when I was 30, became a father for the first time. And one morning I was sitting in Starbucks having a coffee, and who came walking in to get their morning coffee but my biological father, who I had not seen since I was 12. Yeah.
Wow.
I knew exactly who he was when he walked in. He hadn't changed much. And I was there for a business meeting. And long story short, we ended up connecting. And here we are 15 years later, and we still have a relationship. And I would say it's a good relationship. It's not typical dad-son. It's more friendship. And I have 2 younger half brothers, but really Dad Edge, getting into this space, I struggled horribly through it. Here's a perfect example of what it was that was on my mind and heart. Number one, I was failing at it miserably. I was impatient, hot-tempered, not abusive in any way, but just like had very low patience for kids and very low patience for myself, and was very self-critical. My marriage was, if I'm being very generous, it was mediocre at best. On a scale of 1 to 10, it was probably a 3. But I desperately wanted more. But it's almost like, the best way I can describe it is, imagine going to med school. And you show up your first day, you're all ready to rock and roll, and your professor says, hey, guess what? You're a doctor today. There is no more med school. In fact, here's your stethoscope, here's your blood pressure stuff, and here's 100 ways.
Right.
Yeah, get going. And here's 100 things not to do. Cause that's kind of that was my childhood growing up. Like, okay, I know all these
Right.
things not to do. I'm not going to like get drunk and throw a beer bottle at my kid,
Right.
but I didn't know what to do. I didn't have that guidance. So on a really dark night when I was 36, my 12-year-old was 4 at the time, and I spanked him. He stepped out of line, and I spanked him. He hit the ground, and I immediately felt terrible. I went to help him up, and he shuddered with fear. And I was like, "Oh my God, what am I doing? Like, what is going on here?" And I no longer saw him. I saw myself, like as a kid, and that was it. That was it. I drew a line in the sand, and I was like, "This has got to change." So it was in 2012. I was like, "Done living this way. I need to learn how to do this because I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm going to lose everything that's meaningful to me if I don't get this under control." So that just became, as a father, I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to learn. Started the blog in 2013. The blog was just like, hey, I've learned a thing or two, and here's what I've learned. Here's all the mistakes I'm making. It was very authentic and like imperfect, right? And then 2015, I was like, I don't really like writing anymore, even though I've published my first book that year, and we started the podcast. And what I always say is I was on God's good humor for a long time because I had an idea for 10 shows, and after that, I was out. I had no idea what else to do. And here we are 600 episodes later, 5 years later, and it's been a front row seat to the most amazing education I've had yet. And I can definitely say that my marriage, every year I'm married to this wonderful woman, it just keeps getting better, every element of it. As far as being a father, that one, believe it or not, is still tough on me. Only because there's still that huge desire to do it very well, and I make mistakes every day, and I have a hard time letting myself off the hook. But I've really learned a thing or two as far as connection, psychological safety, active listening, tactical empathy, and creating memories. And that's about it.
Right. Well, I so appreciate you sharing with such depth the background that brought you to where you are as a father, as a human, as a husband, all of those different hats that you wear and roles that you have, and that it's not easy and that you struggle with it on a daily basis, because I think it's difficult to admit that it's not easy, or that you don't know, everything, that you don't know what is the right thing to do. I think the benefit, you hear a lot of times people saying how short childhood is. Well, it's actually like 18 times 365 days times, you got 8 hours or 4 hours, or how many hours per day you have together. It's a lot of opportunities to be dad and to practice and to try. And like you said, you don't come out, or baby doesn't come out and you just know it all and you know exactly what to do. It's something that you practice over time and you get better at over time if you can be intentional about it, rather than just saying, well, I'm just here, I got my own stuff to do and we have kids, but instead being intentional about it, like you do, and like you showcase for other dads on your podcast and other online presence opportunities that you have. Tell me about connection, because you have, so your oldest is 14?
He's 14. Yeah.
And your youngest is 4.
Right.
And so connection looks different at all those different ages. But can you walk through some of the ways that at the end of the day that you're able to check the box that says, okay, I did connect with my 14-year-old and I connected with my 4-year-old today, or I didn't do a very good job of that. Here's how I'm going to do it tomorrow.
Ooh, you have some great questions. And yeah, I think for men, and again, being a podcast host, it's been like that front row seat to a great education. So I've learned not only powerful lessons, but simple ones. So one thing is asking really good questions. One thing I've learned from one of our guests, Mark Devine, who's a former Navy SEAL commander, quality of our life depends on the quality of questions we ask ourselves and those around us. So I shy away from questions like, how was school? Do you have homework? What do you want for dinner?
Right.
Good, fine, good, meatloaf, right?
Right.
So, I like good questions. And there was a podcast guest that came on by the name of Todd Herman. Fascinating guy. And he wrote a book called The Alter Ego Effect. For the past 20 years, he's been working with professional athletes on their mental game, to step into an alter ego so they can perform at a higher level. But he's also really good at questions. So he shared on a podcast unexpectedly the 3 questions he asks his kids every day. And what these questions do is they instill a growth mindset, they create connection, and they create psychological safety.
Okay.
So, and the kids they cannot answer with one word. So like, for
Right.
instance, what was the most exciting part of your day?
Okay.
And so I'll ask my 14-year-old, my 12-year-old, and I'll get 4-year-old, not so much, but the 6-year-old, I'll even get to some of the questions I ask him. And so when they hear like, oh, like I got my science test back, like I got a B, man, I'll say, so dude, that's amazing. Like, how did that even happen? Right.
Right.
And why did that feel so good? And then they'll articulate, I studied really hard for it, and I worked really hard for it. And so it felt really good to get that B that I wanted. Right. So, it allows them to reflect on successes and elevated high point moments throughout the day. The second question is, what'd you fail at today? Right. And which I love that question, because even us as adults, we're terrified of failure. And we certainly, and you see it all the time. And you've got 5, I've got 4, but you see it all the time in the sports Little League stands. Like, parents are flipping out because they don't want those kids to fail. They don't even want the feeling of failure, right? In our family is fail fast and learn. Yeah, the growth mindset. But here's how it creates psychological safety. Kids have a hard time saying, yeah, Dad, yeah, I got a D on that test. Okay, cool. So what did you want? I really wanted to be great. Okay, so how might we? I love the how might we question. The how might we question is forward-thinking, generative question. How might we, the next time we have a test, what would you do different?
Right.
I would study harder. I think I'd write flashcards. I love flashcards. I would study harder. I'd make flashcards. Man, that's a great idea. So allowing them to learn from those failures. And the other thing too is articulating that safe landing place where, like, I can tell Dad the bad stuff and he's not going to flip out on me.
It's not that you have to hide the D in the backpack and worry that somebody's going to see it, or that, something's going to hit the fan when that D is uncovered.
Exactly. And they get to articulate how they're going to do things differently, right? The growth mindset. Third question is, what are you most excited about tomorrow? So ending up on another elevated question that's more future based. Yeah. So those questions, so creating an environment of psychological safety with a growth mindset with questions like that, I think are really powerful. With the 6-year-old, I'm doing something a little different. We're really big on, and I wish I would have done this with my 14 and 12-year-old, but we're really big on emotional intelligence and emotional literacy, helping them identify what a feeling is and what it feels like to them, and being able to put it into words. Because you know what it's like. Somebody's angry, like, what's wrong? I don't know.
Right.
Just mad. Well, what's got you? And anger is a secondary emotion. Usually it's, overwhelm or sadness or something, and then they're angry. And with my 6-year-old is, I'm like, hey, what was a happy time today? What was a sad time? What was a mad time? What was a frustrated? Last night he was like, "What does frustrated mean?" I was like, that feeling you get right before you get angry, like you're just like, it's not working, right? He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "That's frustration." He's like, "Oh." So now at the dinner table last night, he's like, "Dad, let's talk about feelings again. Let's talk about emotions again." Like, this is my 6-year-old, and I'm like, "All right, cool. Ask everybody at the table then." So he'll be like, what's everybody's happy time today? What's everybody's sad time? So, like, it's so cool just giving them some emotional intelligence toolkit, early
That's
on.
awesome.
Yeah.
I think those are really powerful questions. I like those. So it's, what was the most exciting part of your day? What did you fail at? And what are you most excited for tomorrow?
Yeah.
And I think those are such good questions because, like you said, it really just opens up and allows them to share with you things that are on their mind, both the good and the bad. And then you can end on the high note of what's going to be great about tomorrow. You have that growth mindset aspect in there. And I like how you talked about how might we, rather than next time you need to do flashcards and you need to put more time, with your head between the books and those sorts of things. Instead, you're like, well, what could we do differently? And I think you're right. that adults view failure as, or even just small failures, as something that's to be avoided and also to protect your child from. Like, how dare they give my kid a D? He worked hard on that. He deserves a B. And we can't allow for failure, except we as adults fail all the time in the way that we communicate with each other, in the way that we do whatever job or work that we do. All of those things we fail. We have problems. We try and protect ourselves. I see the little buddy, that must be the 4-year-old coming in the background there.
This is my 6-year-old. Can I see what he needs real quick?
I like how you talked about the phrase "how might we," because
Yeah.
that just allows them to figure out, what are we going to do from here so that I can, for myself, solve this problem. And the "we" is, instead of, well, what are you going to do different? It's how might we, like, I'm in this with you. We can figure this out together. And if you're not completely sure, I might not be completely sure, but I bet together we can come up with a solution to move from where you were to where you want to be for next time.
Yeah. The how might we question. Have you ever heard of appreciative inquiry?
Hmm. Yep, for sure.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. David Cooper's writer.
Mhm.
So I was trained in appreciative inquiry last October, 50 hours of training. And, so many people are so focused on the problem, right? Like, I'm terrible at communication, or
Right.
I don't have any patience, or like, it's like all these things, right? Or I don't make enough money. And it's like we ask ourselves again really poor questions like, why can't I be a better communicator? Like, or why can't I make more money? In our brain, and this better than anybody, our brains are like Google. It doesn't discriminate if your question's a good one or a bad one. You
Right.
ask yourself a question, it'll give you an answer. So the how might we question is a really powerful question because it puts us in that state of like future vision again of like, well, I don't make great money now, but how might I create another source of revenue? Or
Right.
how might I add value to somebody else's life that they would be willing to pay for? And same thing with communications. Like, how might I be a better communicator? What skills do I need to learn in order to better communicate with my wife?
That is huge. And it's such just that simple question, i- difference between what's wrong with me and what can I do makes the biggest difference in the way that we look at things and the way that we can move forward. And so not only knowing that as a father, but instilling that in your children is just such a great way to promote that growth over scarcity mindset that will help your child to move forward when they fail, because they will fail.
Right. Right. Exactly. I'm sorry. Can you give me one more minute?
Mhm.
Okay. Sorry.
No, you're good. Well, I really like that. How might we? I really like these questions too, because it's something simple. It's not, you have to throw the ball with them for X amount of minutes and then you can check the box that we connected, or you have to do something that, takes you away from your family or takes you away, with one child to say, well, we connected, but it was going for a hike for 3 hours out in the woods. Otherwise, we don't connect on a regular basis. This is something that you can do at the dinner table. This is something you can do while you're helping make dinner or clean up, or whatever you're doing, or just driving from school to practice or school to home or wherever you're going. These are questions that you can ask that then give you the opportunity to connect. It doesn't have to be something that you put on the calendar to say, okay, I connected with my kid on this day by doing this big activity that was pre-planned. These are just 3 questions that you can pull out when you have time, and it gives you the opportunity to connect with your child.
Yeah, and I really like mixing it up. I like the simple things like, hey, how
Hmm.
can we have a super how might we have a really impactful conversation that might only last 3 minutes, right?
Right.
That change the course of somebody's emotions, elevate their mood, create that connection, that bond, create psychological safety. But I also like really going big, like
Sure.
really going big on something. So like, I took the bigs, we call them the bigs and the littles. I took the 12-year-old and the 14-year-old on a camping trip in Colorado, and I'm talking like pooping in the woods camping. Like we were literally 10,482 feet elevation. We were camping in the mountains, and I think in no cell service,
Right.
and we connected on a level that, and I try to do that kind of thing once or no less than once, but if I can 3 times a year, just to do
Awesome.
something big.
Big.
And we do that because, and the whole goal is, I want to create an experience that we're going to remember when I'm on my deathbed, and so are you.
Right.
And we've done things like that. And the cool thing too is while we're doing those things, we have elevated conversations. We learn things together, and we do things together that are going to teach them life lessons. So
Sure.
like when we did that trip, we had amazing conversations around the campfire. We actually fished for trout while we were there, and we caught like 12 fish, and then we cooked them that night. So I got to
Wow.
teach my kids like how to clean a trout.
Right. Right.
And we had great elevated conversations of what it feels like, what it means to be a young man, honesty, integrity. We talked about sex. We talked about porn, and morale around that and ways that we can avoid, being tempted by our eyes and that kind of thing. And the struggles of a young man and men for that matter. And just giving them. Stephen Mansfield wrote a book. He's written several books, but his most recent being, it's called Men on Fire. And I just interviewed him. And the one thing that he's always talked about is like conversations like that have to be ongoing. They never really stop. You never have the talk and it's gone.
Right.
And the cool thing that we solidified during that camping trip is like, I'm your guy. Drugs, alcohol, sex, porn, all these things that are going to tempt you. I'm your guy. You're never going to be in trouble. You're never going to be punished. Let's have a conversation about it. A safe conversation where there's no yelling.
Right.
There's no shame, no guilt. And I'll any question you ask me, I'm going to give you the answer. And sometimes I'll be graphic with it, but I want you to hear from me and not from your buddies. And I definitely don't want you to see something online that you're like, what did I just see? I can't get it out of my head. Right.
Right.
So, cause that's unfortunately, I think our generation, maybe that's a kind of how we learn, depending on the house we grew up in.
So powerful. I think that I love that you have found these ways to connect with your kids, and it's the big things and it's the small everyday conversations. And I think that's just a good framework for dads to take away from this. And hopefully there's a lot of dads listening to this, or there are a lot of moms that will say, hey, you need to listen to this episode. You need to listen to the Dad's Edge podcast so that you have that information going forward and you can be an intentional father, husband, man, etc., so that you have those moments when you get to your deathbed and you get to think back on those special moments that you had with your child. So it's been such a pleasure to get to talk with you. And I know that you've got the 6-year-old that's been wandering in from time to time asking about lunch, but I would love for more parents to find you, especially dads, so that they can be intentional. I know you've got thegooddadproject.com as your website, and then the Dad's Edge podcast, which can be found wherever podcasts are. Thank you so much for giving of your time and sharing your wisdom as a father with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. And thank you for the work you're doing. We need more parenting resources out there. And I love the fact that you're a pediatrician and you've got the bandwidth to do this and to serve. So thank you for your work as well.
You bet.